When I was young, my dad told me a story about one of his friend's kids who really enjoyed the smell of gasoline, don't we all? But for whatever reason, whether it be cluelessness or carelessness, his dad really didn't seem to find a problem with how much his son enjoyed the smell of gasoline. He would even ask my dad and other friends and coworkers to open up their gas tanks when he was around so his son could get a noseful. But the way that my dad described the aftermath and how this guy ended up turning out gave young Chase a chronic fear of gas stations for a pretty long time. It's been a really long time since I first heard this story, probably nearly 15 years at this point, but I still remember him telling me that the gas fumes ate holes in this guy's brain. Almost similarly to what the Dune worm did to RFK Jr., but way worse. But now that I'm a bit older and wiser, I know that this is a myth and the gas fumes weren't actually eating holes in this guy's brain, they were actually dissolving it. How's it going, everyone? Welcome or welcome back. My name is Chase. Let's talk about huffing. As always, if you enjoy the content and you want to see more videos like this, don't forget to that like and subscribe button, and I hope you do enjoy. Thank you so much for watching. So first of all, what is huffing? Well, it seems pretty self-explanatory. Huffing is when people choose to inhale chemical fumes in order to catch a quick buzz. These fumes are coming off of everyday household items like empty whipped cream canisters, spray paint, computer duster, gasoline. There's even degenerates out there that huff Raid bug spray, nail polish remover, glue, canned deodorant. If we were to list them all, we'd be here all day, but you get the point. These aren't exactly things that are made for human consumption. When these products are used in this manner, they're called inhalants, and that's where a lot of the confusion comes from because people hear the word inhalant and they assume that it's anything that you inhale. So the word inhalant is a little bit misleading. No, your mint flume is not an inhalant. You can still blink it. It's not going to give you brain damage or kill you immediately. The word inhalant specifically refers to chemicals that are volatile, meaning that they evaporate easily and were never meant to be put into your body. I know, breaking news, inhaling toxic fumes is bad for you. It doesn't exactly take Einstein to figure that out, but you'd be surprised. Not only can they cause organ damage like heart failure and kidney and liver problems, but inhalants are particularly extremely damaging to your brain. Not all inhalants are equally as bad for you. Obviously, something like gasoline is going to be much more damaging in the short and long term than something like glue, but at a core level, they all do the same thing. They all cause irreversible damage to your brain and body extremely quickly. Kind of like sativa and indica, there are two main types of inhalants, solvents and aerosols, or as I've coined them, brain eaters and heart stoppers. Doesn't that sound like a good time? Brain eaters, or solvents, are volatile organic compounds that evaporate easily into the air. In this camp, you have things like paint thinners, nail polish removers, glues, and gasoline. Gas is the perfect example here because we all know what gasoline smells like. It's an incredibly strong and distinct smell, and it's because the fumes evaporate incredibly easily into the air. When you inhale, the solvent fumes enter your bloodstream within seconds. Most solvents produce an effect similar to alcohol, a short-lasting buzz of euphoria and lack of coordination. But stronger solvents like gasoline can produce much more pronounced effects, like a complete disconnect from reality and even vivid hallucinations. But these effects aren't being produced by a specific receptor or system being targeted in your brain. Solvents are fat soluble, which means that they dissolve very easily in lipids. Lipids being the fatty molecules that make up your cell membranes and myelin sheaths around your neurons. Because they're fat soluble, solvents can pass the blood-brain barrier extremely easily, the protective filter that's designed to keep toxins out of your brain. But also because of this, they're literally dissolving into your brain and causing permanent brain damage. The cell membrane loses structure, the cells can no longer properly communicate, and eventually they die off completely. So you're essentially turning yourself into a living zombie. This is why long-term solvent abuse typically leads to side effects like memory loss, loss of coordination, tremors, and even permanent brain shrinkage. They can even cause things like neuropathy, which is nerve damage leading to numbness in parts of the body, and sudden sniffing death syndrome, which is exactly what it sounds like. They can cause irregular heartbeat leading to fatal cardiac arrest, and this can even happen on your first time. And if it doesn't happen to you on your first time, well, lucky you. But it can happen to you on your second time or your third time. Every single time you inhale these things, you're rolling the dice. Heart stoppers or aerosols are very similar to solvents, and many of them often contain solvents in them, but they come with an added risk. Solvents just dissolve easily into the air. Aerosols come with pressurized propellants in them. So these are things like spray paint, air fresheners, hairspray, bug spray, whipped cream, basically anything that comes in a pressurized can. So the user is not only inhaling solvents, but they're also inhaling these compressed gases that shoot the solvents out of the can. They enter the body and dissolve into the brain identically, but they onset even faster because of the compressed gas. These propellants used are essentially anesthetics, so they slow the brain down even more and can even temporarily shut off parts of your central nervous system. The result is a buzz that hits quicker and more intensely. The same immediate euphoric rush, but a more numb and dizzy feeling with tingling sensations all over your body. It's a more floaty and dissociative experience than solvents typically are. These anesthetic gases also make blacking out or falling unconscious a much more common experience on aerosols rather than solvents. The reason I call these heart stoppers is because many of the propellants used are heavier than oxygen, which means that they displace oxygen in your lungs and bloodstream. This is what leads to the blackouts and loss of consciousness, but it also leads to brain cell death as your brain starves for oxygen. Some of these propellant gases, like butane, sensitize your heart to adrenaline, which is why I call these heart stoppers, because even just standing up can instantly stop your heart. So while sudden sniffing death syndrome can occur with both solvents and aerosols, it's much more commonly seen in the latter. These pressurized gases also freeze the lining of your lungs and can cause frostbite in your airways, which leads to permanent lung damage and, in extreme cases, even complete respiratory failure. So now you're probably wondering, what is the appeal here? Like, why do people do this? And I think there's a pretty short and sweet answer. Young and dumb people find something that is incredibly easily accessible, and they don't really understand the full risks of what they're doing. And like anything else, once you make it a habit, the habit becomes incredibly hard to break. Even though inhalants aren't traditionally addictive, there's no physical withdrawals, the psychological dependency that builds is incredibly real. It's no secret that life can be very hard and stressful at times, and everyone's always looking for some sort of mental escape, whether it be the gym or art, or maybe even just someone watching their favorite TV show. Unfortunately, young people don't always have access to the legal escapes that adults do, and they tend not to always make the smartest decisions. Like everyone else, they're just looking for something to temporarily ease the stress that comes with life, but they just happen to find the worst, most damaging possible thing. And I'm kind of assuming that it's a young people thing because it just seems like something teenagers would be doing. It doesn't really seem like an adult would be tempted to try something like this when they can just go buy a six-pack at the fucking corner store. They try it once, feels pretty good, it's kind of fun, so then they do it again, and then they do it again. And eventually it becomes a cycle. A lot of people take for granted that your brain at its core is a pattern recognition tool. So once it starts seeing the pattern and correlating huffing with relief, that habit becomes incredibly hard to break. Like many of the other substances that we've talked about, there is an online internet subculture built around huffing. r/huffing community 2 is a subreddit where users go to share their trip reports, memes, and even just pictures of what they've recently been inhaling. A lot of the posts are very nihilistic, and the community itself is almost sort of a collective coping mechanism. They use the inhalants to cope with stress, they realize that it's ruining their life and destroying their body, and then they use the community to cope with the inhalant use. You may have noticed that I said Huffing Community 2, and that's because the first one is no longer open to the public, which is probably for everyone's best interest. The original Huffing community was closed only under a year ago when a mod going by u/Reaper of the Crypt made a post about trying to end his own life. He posted a brief message on the subreddit simply reading, "Goodbye everyone, gonna be gone soon. Take care." Another Huffing community mod made a post about the situation the next day on r/dph. "Hey y'all, I'm a mod in Huffing community. I'm afraid I have bad news about Reaper." So about 12 hours ago, a user by the name of Reaper of the Crypt posted about how he planned to take 4 grams of Benadryl. Unfortunately, he did. As of information now, we are pretty sure he has passed on. There still is hope, but it's unlikely. Reaper was a very helpful user in r/Huffing community. He posted guides and helped many before us mods could. Because of these actions, I have posthumously awarded him approved user status and sent him a mod invite as a final salute to his heroic actions in the subreddit. He has saved many lives by letting people know about dangerous chemicals in inhalants, and helped ID which ones will cause the least damage. This situation was very unexpected. I tried everything I could, but I was too late to help him. If anyone is feeling like this, reach out to me. I will try to help. Rest in peace, soldier. Fortunately, this was a false alarm, and Reaper would make a post the next day letting everyone know that he is okay. Well, took a ridiculous amount, puked up a majority of it, and wrote out the rest. Just happy to be alive. stay sober. But this incident was responsible for the closure of Huffing community, and even 9 months later, it remains closed to the public. When the community first closed, I remember hearing that they do want to reopen it in the future with a more harm reductionist approach, but I think for everyone's best interest, it's better that these communities just don't exist at all, because they kind of do normalize the use of these substances. To be fair though, I've received that same criticism on these videos, and I would obviously argue against that and disagree, so I'm sure a mod from Huffing community would argue that there is some sort of benefit to these communities existing. It's obviously not a very socially acceptable thing to struggle with, so maybe having an online community centered around harm reduction and quitting could be a beneficial thing. Anyways, you guys know the drill. Let's read some trip reports. A terrible night I will never forget. This is difficult to explain. However, I will try my best to describe the experience. I was an art school student in San Diego and had been working on a project for my perspective class. The drawing was finished and I had grabbed my paper cement to secure my project onto a black backboard. Now, before I go any farther, I was living in a very small studio with horrible ventilation. As I was putting the glue on the board to secure my drawing, I started to get a slightly cold and tingly feeling all through my hands and feet. I figured it was the glue and just continued to work. The effects had spread and started creeping up into my abdomen. It was a very nice feeling. I then decided that I was going to try sniffing the can to see what all my old punk rock buddies were talking about when they said they had sniffed glue. I took the cap off the can and placed it to my nose and began to inhale the fumes for about a minute. At first, my entire body got cold and tingly, and soon enough, the hand that was holding the can to my face started to look like an elephant's trunk to me. It was amusing, so I continued to sniff the fumes from this horrible glue. About 15 seconds later, I was looking at my cutting board, which was a big green rubber mat with a grid on it for precise cutting. The pattern started to appear on everything I looked at. A yellow-green grid on everything in my studio. The sounds of my air conditioner and my refrigerator started to echo and clash with each other, and soon I began to suffer from a spinning effect, much like when you drink far too much. The patterns were still placed on everything I saw and was beginning to clash with the sounds from my AC. The spinning became more of a half spin that violently went back and forth. Soon I felt as though my body was being pulled from every direction. The spinning continued to get worse. It started to spin from several different directions, and the pattern from my cutting board was still present, but from all the spinning had started to create new patterns and textures. The pattern soon turned into that of casino chips covered in pool table cloth. Then the casino chips started to spin individually. All I could think to myself is, wow. So I just died, and this is what the afterlife is like? Soon the spinning became much worse, and the sounds became that of those little metal balls that are suspended and hit each other, only it was much more rapid and rather disturbing. Out of nowhere, it all went away, and I was suddenly suspended in nothingness. I had no body, no head, nothing. I was just a spiritual essence. During this time suspended in nothingness, I remember being told the meaning to life and how we all got here. Then hell began. Remember in The Matrix when Neo says he needs weapons and those thousands of rows of weapon racks flew into the scene? It was something like that, but it was rows of fire and souls. Screams of women and children surrounded me from every direction. Shortly after that, it all just disappeared, and then a silhouette of a man in a fedora was approaching. But it was a silhouette made of green code. His head soon flew away, and then I heard static. Nothing but static for what seemed like a lifetime. I then hear a voice saying, "Your life begins today. Please turn your television set off now." I now feel something cold from underneath me, so I look down and see a shiny cold object, and then bam, I am back in reality. But not quite. I tried to move, and I did, but I felt like my body was still sitting down. My legs were moving, but I felt like I was still in the chair, and still felt like I had the can in my hand, but it was not. It was on the table. I sat down on the couch, and my arms felt like they were made of rubber and had sagged to the floor, like an old, abused Stretch Armstrong. About a minute later, I felt normal again, but with a crushing headache. This experience had disturbed me so badly that all I did for a week was sit in my bed thinking about what had happened and was desperately trying to remember the good details about the experience and what it meant. My friends tried to talk to me, but I was so disturbed I could not even acknowledge their presence. Never, ever, ever will I make that mistake again. I was once a Christian, but now I don't know what to believe. Are we a computer program? Are we just molecules in something bigger? Do we live in a matrix? I don't know, but I know that every time I go to church, all I can think about is this experience and how disturbing it was. Several years later, I tried ecstasy for the first time, and that has helped me greatly in dealing with this. I will regret this for the rest of my life. My experience with inhalants was absolutely dreadful. Not only was it scary, but it is a miracle I am not dead or a vegetable. After heavily using substances, I moved to another state and therefore lost all of my connections. Feeling depressed and with no drugs to use, I turned to inhalants. Anyway, enough with the background. Here is my experience, taking place over about 2 months. Sitting around the house with nothing to do, I came across a can of butane about the size of a can of spray paint. I used one of the attachments for filling a lighter to breathe the gas in, taking straight butane, no oxygen. The experience was almost a relief at that point in time. Anything that would get me a buzz was good at the time. Lightheadedness and an array of geometric colors began to show up. There sounded like there was a sound similar to that of an industrial fan or something of that nature coming from the air vent. In addition to that, I felt almost paralyzed, as if I was in a trance. Looking back, it was probably brain cells being fried. I continued to use for several days, and the experience slowly began to become something far more than I could have ever imagined. Over the period of a couple days, I began to feel almost as if I was in an alternate reality whenever I inhaled the butane. It was like everything around me was exactly the way it should be. I can't even explain it. Almost like looking at a picture of someone's room in a magazine and not one thing was out of place, even though my room was a disaster. This feeling of an alternate reality seemed to go hand in hand with the euphoric feeling I was experiencing. However, as my daily use continued, I began to hallucinate whenever I used. It started off with small things, sounds and small visual distortions such as red trails appearing in the air, always red for some reason. Doing spirals were most common at first. Then I started to become paranoid whenever I used. The hallucinations seemed to adapt to my paranoia, greatly intensifying it. This is where things got so messed up I can hardly describe it. Not using text anyway, I will do the best I can. As I continued to use, it started to seem like there was a dark shadow literally on the corner of my eyeball. A feeling of heaviness seemed to occupy that spot as well. I started to feel like there was a demon or something out to get me. As I continued to use, the feeling of a demon in my presence became more real. I began to feel as if this shadow was going into my eye from that dark spot. It felt wet and like it was the hottest thing I have ever felt, only it didn't burn. It was truly one of the most uncomfortable experiences of my life. As this feeling began to get worse and stronger, a feeling of impending doom came over me at the same time. Like if I let this thing continue going into my eye, I would die a horrible death, and worse feelings would continue long after. In an attempt to eradicate that feeling, I began spinning in circles, and whatever it was going into my eye began to recede. I never inhaled butane after that. However, being the dumbass I am, a few weeks later I used a different chemical, brake cleaner, and at school of all places. While using brake cleaner in an automotive class, I got the great idea to huff it. I saturated some paper towels and pocketed them when no one was looking, and after class was over, I went into the bathroom to get buzzed. Holding the paper towels over my mouth and nose, I began to breathe. I went back out into the hallway feeling more fucked up than I had ever been on inhalants, and that's when the deepest, scariest hallucination I have ever experienced took place. The hallway was about 100 yards in length and full of people. Groups talking, people walking, and everyone just carrying on with whatever they were doing. Suddenly, time froze. Everything and everyone around me froze in place, like someone had flipped a switch. Someone in front of me was leaning forward to pick something up. A person leaning on the wall was taking a drink of soda, and the bubbles were frozen in place. Scary music sounded like something from a pipe organ, overwhelmed my ears as I tried to comprehend what had just happened. Darkness was slowly closing in from both ends of the hallway. Then, I thought I figured it out. I had died. A girl I knew came out of this frozen state. Meanwhile, time still remained frozen. "Are you okay?" she asked me. "No, I'm dead," I replied. "What are you talking about?" she asked. "I'm dead, don't you understand?" I replied again. Without warning, I began to lose my balance, and all at once everything around me unfroze, as if it had never been frozen to begin with. I felt more sober and more alive than I have ever been in my entire life. It was like I was just dropped into hell and just got pulled up into heaven. I realized I was indeed not dead. I realized the exact magnitude of what I had been doing to myself and just how lucky I was to be alive. To this day, I have never used another inhalant of any kind and never will again. I love life too much to risk death, and that is exactly what I was doing. I was on top of the world after that, with a reformed outlook on life. I hope this experience can shed some sort of light on the danger of inhalants, and how each use is the equivalent of Russian roulette. Today, I am normal, alive, and don't have brain damage, and count each day as a blessing. Don't use inhalants. No high in the world is worth putting your life on the line. Not psychedelia. It's really hard here in Utah to find good substances. My friend told me of his gasoline experiences, and I was curious to do this, so after my friend told me the best way to inhale the fumes, I went home and tried it. I'm telling you now how dumb it is. I went with my friend's Coke bottle idea. Put just a small ring of gasoline at the bottom of a 2-liter bottle, put your mouth onto the bottle, and inhale. I did this a couple times in the garage alone. My first huffs, I felt my head sink into my body, so I thought I had no neck, like Wise with my eyes. I huffed a bit more. My impaired judgment told me to do this in the house downstairs. Like a dumbass, I did. I did it more and more. I looked at the wall in between rounds. The oddest pattern. It was purple and yellow, 60s psychedelic art. It was spinning in circles, slowly and tranquil. I sat on the couch, awed with a gas bottle in my lap. I inhaled more and more, seeing how close I can come before insanity and melting my brain. I thought the computer a couple feet away from me was helping with the nuke job. I had to find a new seat away from the computer. Finally, I was so completely gone, not the good gone, but awake nightmares about myself as a child. I actually started drinking the gas. Like I said, it was a 2-liter bottle, so subconsciously, I thought it was soda or something. I passed out. I had this nightmare about me back 10 years ago when I was 3 or 4. From the sins I did, God decided to punish me. He threw a beehive from the purple and black heavens, and it hit me in the mouth. The juice of the beehive got all over my face and stung. It stung so bad. I woke up later and, come to find out, I had actually still been drinking the gasoline while I was passed out. The beehive in my nightmare was actually the 2-liter bottle, and all the gasoline spilled out onto my face. That was what was stinging. I looked at the couch I was sitting on. It was drenched on the front side. I figured it was the spilled gasoline or my vomit. I came to find out it was both. I'm still too fucked up to clean it up or to do anything about it. I heard my dad walk into the house upstairs, home from work. I had the sense to hide the bottle behind a different couch. I sat on the rocking chair and turned the TV on. I was rocking gently back and forth. I actually wasn't. The gasoline makes you feel like you are. I forgot my dad was upstairs. A couple minutes later, I turned my head to the left. There he was. He was screaming at me, asking me why the house stunk like gas. I hurried and ditched upstairs. He followed me. I took a seat on the kitchen table, realizing if I had left, he would probably tackle me into the street and drag me home. After he calmed down a little, I constructed enough words and brain cells to tell him that I was lighting gas on fire outside and it must have got on my shoes. Him, being an adolescent himself, didn't believe me and stormed downstairs looking for evidence that I was inhaling. Thank God who pegged me with that beehive. He didn't. He left back to work and I, coming down, cleaned up my mess. He still doesn't believe me, I don't think, but he hasn't disowned me, at least not yet. If there is anybody who is reading this who is planning on doing this, I say that experimenting is good, but only once or twice. After that, you lose reality and you're incapable of thinking. Seriously, the friend who taught me how to do this 2-liter bottle trick is completely gone mentally. I went through hell that experience. Not really hell, but mental deterioration. It took a couple days to straighten out who I was. When I passed out, I honestly thought I was 3 again. I came to after the beehive and for a couple minutes thought I was 20 plus years in the future. Besides that one hallucination, it was not psychedelic, thus I don't recommend it. Psychedelic is Latin for mind altering. What is Latin for mind melting? It's crazy that he says experimenting is good, but yeah, I wouldn't do it more than once or twice. Then it gets bad. As you see your friend who fucking destroyed his brain. Reality or illusion? This was one of the stupidest things I've ever done. I was totally unprepared for the effects of the glue. I wasn't even sure if it would do anything. Well, it certainly did do something, and I wouldn't do it again if you paid me. I had sniffed glue before this time I will be describing, but never enough to do anything to me other than make me feel a little bit drunk for about 5 minutes. This is very hard to describe or even remember, but I'll tell you what I can. I got home from school and was bored, so I grabbed the cement glue and went up to my bedroom. I sat at the edge of my bed and started inhaling the crap. I didn't breathe any fresh air in for a few minutes, just the glue. The TV was on downstairs, and I sort of felt like I saw the person from the commercial come out of it and start smacking their lips, though I couldn't see the TV and maybe couldn't even hear it, but that's where I thought it came from. This was just the beginning. Then everything started to spin faster and faster. By now, I had totally forgotten that I had sniffed the glue and thought what was happening to me was real. Throughout the whole trip, there was this weird buzzing sound. The only way I can think to describe it is when you have those mini cars when you wind up the tires, then let go, and it drives by itself. But after you wind it up, you just release it in your hand and let it spin through the air. It sounded a little bit like that. I'm not sure if my eyes were closed or open, and I'm not sure how long the trip was, but I wasn't able to move. Maybe because I was so shocked at what I was seeing that I didn't think to try to move because I thought it was real. Anyway, after the room stopped spinning, I sort of became part of a group of Pac-Men. I myself was a Pac-Man, I think. Anyway, they had little tails that were hitting their bodies, and this motion seemed to be making the buzzing noise. That stung like a bitch, that little tail hitting me. I could actually feel it. These little Pac-Men were part of a picture, and then that picture was part of a bigger picture, and that one was part of an even bigger picture, and so on and so on. I thought I was caught in this. At that point, I thought that my whole life was a big joke. Everything I've done so far had no point. I thought that the phone company had planned this all out and my life was a pointless farce. I don't know where I got the idea that it was from the phone company, but that's what I thought. So I was in the middle of the big dark nowhere, as a Pac-Man, getting smacked by my own tail with an annoying buzzing in my ear, stuck in a repeating void. Again, the whole time I thought this was real. Then, after being stuck in these pictures, making up pictures, I thought to myself, this was my first sense-making thought, what if I just pull my head back? What if I try to move? Because I was looking through the eyes of a Pac-Man, I just jumped to the conclusion that I couldn't move. So I tried to pull my head back, and as I did so, all the pictures that the Pac-Men were making started to spell something out. I thought to myself, this is the answer to the universe. But I didn't really care because I was so fucking scared. Then I pulled my head back some more and tried to move, and I slowly started to come out of this awful trip. I looked to see if I could still see the answer to the universe in front of me and discovered that I had been looking at the back of my film case in the trip. That looked a little like a phone book. Maybe that's where I got the idea that it was the phone company's fault. Anyway, I sat there and I could still feel the little buzzing tail smacking me, and I could still sort of see it. And for some reason, I thought that because of this buzzing thing, all the people in the world were gone, that I was all alone. I know it doesn't make sense, but that's what I thought. And like I said, I wasn't tripping anymore. I was back to myself, except for this buzzing thing. So I run downstairs, the thing still smacking me, saying, "Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god," and shaking uncontrollably, crying. I was so freaked out. I was looking for people, anyone, to see if I was really alone. By now, the buzzing had almost stopped, and the little tail had disappeared. It wasn't really a tail, it was hitting my shoulder. That's the only way I can think to describe it. So I saw my mother, All the while, I couldn't stop saying, "Oh my God," and I was just freaked. After a few minutes, I was okay, but for days after that, I would burst into tears just thinking about this trip. It was so real. I was actually seeing it. I will never do that again. I regret it so much, and I felt so detached from my body that I didn't think my body even existed anymore. Some people might think that this is some sort of spiritual experience, but for me, it was just hell. And it's turned me right the fuck off of psychoactives. I'm scared to do shrooms, LSD, etc. Anyways, guys, that's all for this video. As always, thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it all the way through. I really do hope you enjoyed the video and learned something new, or at least found it entertaining. If you did enjoy, don't forget to like, comment, share, do all that stuff, because it really helps support me and my ability to continue to make these videos. I say it every time, I'm like a broken record, but the support you guys show me really does blow my mind. It's extremely humbling, and I really am grateful that you guys allow me to do this stuff, because without you guys supporting the channel and watching the videos, I wouldn't be able to make these videos, you know? I wouldn't be able to spend my time doing this. So one more time, thank you guys. My name is Chase, and I'll see you again in the next video. Peace.